Hello and welcome back to the Jump Show Cheltenham special. As always, I'm joined by Dan and Jake to look back at the past weekend's racing and look ahead to the Cheltenham Festival. We also have some handicap entries come through, hence the delayed video. We're going to go through them in just a little bit, but we will start off by asking the boys how their weekends were. How are you doing, Dan?
Very well, thank you, mate. We are firmly on the road to Cheltenham. It's all kicking off. Previews round the corner. It's exciting times. The racing may be degrading in quality slightly as we edge closer, but hey, the big day is nearly upon us.
And a big preview for you as well. You've been asked to go over to Dublin. So go on.
I have.
Who are you going to be joining up with?
Oh, it's an all-star panel, which I have no business being on whatsoever. I'm going to be the biggest sore thumb standing out for multiple reasons, and I'm the only British guy there as well. So there's no hiding place. So yeah, so David Jennings will be on there, Don McLean, so the Race Hour podcast guys, Dermot. Yeah, it's just Marky Fogarty as well, David Mullins. So yeah, I don't know how I've done this, to be honest, but I'll be there.
You'll be taking some pouters, won't you, for sure?
Oh, deservedly so.
Yes.
And I might just about work up the courage to give some back. We'll see.
And Jake, how was your weekend?
Yeah, no, weekend was good. Got winners on the board for once, which was nice. And yeah, you know, we've had like Willie Mullins' stable tour this morning. It doesn't get much more exciting than that, does it?
Brilliant stuff. We'll start off with Hillcrest's performance from the weekend. And this was a really good performance, but this is a Cheltenham podcast. So what I wanted to ask you, Jake, was where does this horse line up in the Albert Bartlett picture now?
Yeah, so it was a really testing weekend of action at Haydock and Ascot. You know, the ground was very testing at both tracks, and I'd be very apprehensive about taking that form forward to the Cheltenham Festival with only, you know, like a 3-week turnaround. So yeah, when Holstone came home in the Rendlesham, you know, they were absolutely walking home. So definitely very cautious of the Haydock form, probably more so than the Ascot. But yeah, Hillcrest just made it look like easy work, didn't he? He went from the front, obviously. He was taken on by Greenbrook for a long way. That rival ended up getting beaten out of sight. So it was clearly a top performance to keep on going through the ground. And he just absolutely sluiced through the mud. Like he didn't stop. He didn't get any slower at any point down that run-in. So it was a very impressive performance. As I said, there is those apprehensions of whether he can turn that around and get back to the Albert Bartlett and go again. The trainer shares those thoughts somewhat, and you know they are going to either run him at Cheltenham or at Aintree in one of the 3-mile novice hurdles. And that is yet to be decided, obviously. But yeah, if he turns up, he's definitely a big danger in the Bartlett, that's for sure. He's short enough now. He's into like 4 to 1 second favourite or whatever it is. But yeah, it was a very good performance, and it marks him out as a top horse.
I'd have to agree with you on all counts. Actually, I hold my reservations on him at Cheltenham, not only because of the quick turnaround, and that was really heavy conditions, but also the drying ground on Friday. I feel like he's a horse who might want it a little bit softer. Dan, what was your take on Hillcrest?
Oh, he's a lovely horse, isn't he? You can't not love him. He's been campaigned quite aggressively this season, especially for a horse of his size. He's clearly going to be a chaser next season. So they've really got some runs into him, which maybe some trainers would be a bit more hesitant of doing so. But that was his 5th start over hurdles. Every time he generally runs his race. He was unlucky at Cheltenham last day, and a very, very likable individual. And Henry Daly's not hidden his admiration for the horse. I think he said he's probably the best he's ever had. So clearly held in some regard. I just have a feeling he might end up at Aintree. Obviously, it's a fairly quick turnaround to Cheltenham. They're not going to be in a mad rush to give this horse another hard race this season so soon after. Both races are very much within his grasp, and he's a big player wherever he turns up. But I'd say Aintree would seem the more likely option from my perspective anyway.
We'll move on to Teupu, who unfortunately did miss the festival last year. Now, this was a serious performance, given it was only a grade 3. I think you can probably argue this was the best performance from a 2-mile hurdler who's a boy. The line through Durasso solidifies the form, despite Quilixios sort of underperforming. Suddenly, I feel like we have a bit of life in the division, because at the start of the season, it was Honeysuckle and then Sharjah, and we already knew how that outcome was going to end up. But now we have Tiupu and possibly even Appreciate It, although I heard the laugh. Most probably already know the outcome anyway. But it does feel like a much stronger division now than at least it was even 3 months ago. What was your take on Tiupu, Dan?
Very good. Very, very good. I mean, it's a strange one. Normally, I'm very hesitant with these ex-juveniles going to their first season open company. But I think we discussed this before we came on and recorded. But last year's juveniles looking a serious bunch, aren't they? It's with probably the best two in terms of Quilixios and Montmoral have been the most disappointing. But everything else has been extremely impressive. Zanahir's held his own. Even the ones that have been down the field in some of the graded races have been holding their own in open company very admirably. So quite clearly a decent crop of juveniles. And in this case, Tiupu, really, really impressive performance. He's been steadily getting slightly better. He was beating Quilixios a couple of times, but this was another step up entirely. Durasso this season has been a rejuvenated character. He's always been a fairly okay horse, but this year he's probably developed into a low to mid 150s performer, and a reliable one at that. And you can really set your watch by him. And he beat him by 11 lengths. And in a slowly run race, he really did pull away nicely. And based on the weights and measures here, he beat him by 11 lengths. You're talking a mid 160s performance here. As we know of Honeysuckle, given she's going to get £7, you need to be performing at like a mid 170 level to beat her, an on-song Honeysuckle. So it kind of gives you an impression of the task that he has still. But I mean, he'd be the way I'd be going with an each way bet at this stage in the Champion Hurdle, because this was a really likable performance on ground, which, although he's got a good record on testing ground, Robbie Powell seemed very adamant that he hated it and he wants a sounder surface. So if that's true and he can improve again for a quicker ground, then there's no reason why he won't be in the shake-up in the Champion Hurdle, although it's, again, very tough task to overthrow the mighty Honeysuckle.
I thought that was a touch harsh on Montmoral. He's only ran once this season and finished the race lame. He's due to come out this weekend, so we'll find out after that. Jake, what was your take on Tiupu?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Dan. I thought it was a very impressive performance. I think that's the general opinion from everyone, really, isn't it? It was an impressive performance. The handicapper agrees. He's put him up £11 to a mark of 160 in Ireland, so that's the type of level that he's already at, which is good. Durasso is a decent yardstick in second. He always runs in these, grade 3, grade 2 type hurdles and chase in Ireland. He's been running really well this season, so I think that's a decent bit of form. He's definitely a contender for the Champion Hurdle. Maybe Honeysuckle might be a stretch too far this year, but he's still a young horse, still got improvement to come, and potentially next year, then he would have an even stronger chance. You never know how these improve, but I think it was a very likable performance. The bit that really caught my eye in this race, though, was the 4th place horse, and that was the Tide Turns. Now, he got a very, very sneaky ride from Dennis O'Regan. He tanked into the race, really. Like, he was held up right at the back, got into the race perfectly down the outside of the field, jumped nicely. He's got to remember he's a 4-year-old, so he was up against much older horses. He was getting the weight concession as part of that, but he still held his own against older horses. And then going down towards the last, it looked like he was going to easily take third from Quilixios. He was about a length and a half ahead at that point. But somehow Dennis O'Regan, when the camera was off, managed to work his magic and get him to finish 4th just behind Quilixios. So perfect run for the Boodles. He was given a mark of 135 in Ireland before the race. The Irish handicapper hasn't changed him after the race, so he's on a mark of 135 in Ireland. You're probably talking 140s, low 140s for the Boodles, but he's clearly a horse of a lot of talent, and Gordon was desperate to get him qualified for the Boodles. So yeah, he's a very interesting horse for that.
We'll move on to Fakir Duderis, the Irish coming over and taking our grade 1. So there's not really much new there. I'm a big fan of Fakir. He is a really consistent horse, but would be somewhat frustrating as well. Can you see him turning up in Cheltenham? I think that's the question I have. He's obviously taken his racing quite well. He's raced quite often throughout seasons. Could he miss Cheltenham and go to Aintree? And I'll head over to you, Jake.
I would imagine that's the plan, yes. It was definitely a good opportunity. I've said before the race that I thought that he was the only true grade 1 horse over this, 2.5 mile trip that was running in that Ascot Chase. I thought there was loads of good horses, grade 2 performers, but I thought he was the only grade 1 horse, and he obviously proved that by, tanked into the race, really. He just stalked his way in, not a bother on him. Obviously, he got in a bit of trouble around the second last, but then he went on again after the last and won it. Yeah, I'd imagine that they would skip it and go straight for the Melling. Obviously, he won it last year. Go back to that race. I don't see why you would change it. I don't ever see a scenario where he's going to beat Allaho, to be honest. So yeah, for me, it would make sense just to give him a bit of a break. Goes for Aintree.
What about you, Dan? Do you have any more to add on Fakir Didoris?
There's no need to go over it too much. I think with this show being a focus on Cheltenham, I think we're of the opinion he'd have a place chance in a Ryanair, but Aintree would be the more realistic win scenario for him. So nice performance. A few disappointments in that race, you'd have to say. St Calvados probably being the main one. Apparently bled, which is a shame because he's been very enigmatic in recent years, clearly talented, but just struggled to find the race course and get there on too many occasions now. But yeah, probably to Aintree with Fakir would be the logical next step for a winning chance.
This will be the part of the show where I sort of chuck it to you two. Today was the day that the handicap entries came out, and you guys have spent all day, by all accounts, looking through them.
Day.
Well, you two don't work, do you? According to the group chat, you've been flat out on it. I'll head over to you, Jake, for some notable handicap entries, or maybe some horses who didn't get entered.
Yeah, so I mainly focused today on horses that were, like, I took the market from before the entries were released, and then I've gone through it and I've taken out everything that was short in the market that is not entered. So if we start in the Ultima, so the favourite for the race was Sham Blue. A lot of people wanted to back him for a handicap after his performance earlier in the season at Wetherby when he fell and looked like he's going to hack up. They're going for the Ryanair. They haven't entered him in any single handicap, so that's out the window. Ascario 10, he's going for the Irish National, so he's also a non-runner in the Ultima. Galahad Quest was around 10-1. He's also gone. And Ask Me Early was another one that Harry Fry's got, that's a decent horse, but he's also out of the Ultima. The Boodles, there wasn't really too many casualties, to be honest. Pied Piper wasn't entered, but I mean, he wouldn't have run anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant. And then Iseo for Paul Nicholls is probably the most high-profile horse that didn't get an entry that you probably would have expected to. Onto the Coral, unfortunately, one of my selections didn't make it, and that's Phil's Duderies. I've no idea why. Obviously, Nicky Henderson did mention it as a bit of a target for him not that long ago. So I'm assuming there was some kind of injury or something. But yeah, he didn't get an entry. Grand Annual was one of the races that got more non-runners than I think we were expecting. I think Dan will touch on that in a minute in terms of the numbers. But Gentleman Demi was 8-1 favourite and most boards. He's not entered. Third Time Lucky was in there. We didn't expect him to run here anyway, but he's not in there. Funambule Cibola for Benicia Williams is another one that's not in there, which was around 9-1. I think that's kind of a bit surprising. Most people would have thought he would have got, but she's obviously got Brave Siaska and some others anyway, so that's not the end of the world for her. The temps, I've gone through this before, but it's just the ones that haven't been qualified. So like Ard Hill, Magic Tricks, Grand Noir, they're the shortest ones that were in there. The plate got absolutely decimated. So if you like something for there, is more than likely a non-runner at this point. Sham Blue was obviously top. Seal de Neige, Capadano, Blue Sari, they're all gone. Galliard de Mesnil, Master McShee, they're gone as well. Torn and Frayed was a very interesting one. Apparently, there seems to have been a bit of a mistake. I think Connections might have accidentally not entered him.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
Yeah, that's what someone was telling me on Twitter. So that might be a bit of a guessing one. Yeah, that was definitely
that seemed like the most obvious one to me. That was the one that really stood out as, where is he?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a disaster. Oh dear.
Yeah, so apparently they were on the Connections were on the phone to Weatherby's, but I don't know if there's anything they can do about it at this point. So yeah, unlucky if you were on Torn and Frayed. And then Phoenix Way was also not entered in the plate, so he's only entered in the Ultima, so you'd imagine that's the way they're going to go with him. Oh, and Noble Yates is another one that wasn't in the plate, even though he's changed Connections. Kim Muir, again, Frontal Assault, obviously 5-1 favourite now, and most of his market rivals didn't get an entry, so Birchdale didn't, Away with the Sea didn't, Death Duty obviously would have been higher than the weight cap anyway, but it didn't, and Imperial Alcazar didn't. Remastered also hasn't been entered in any of the handicap chases either, so he's another one to note. The county, Willie didn't really enter any of his interesting ones like Kilcrook, Govan, El Fabiolo, and Free Stripe Life, but he did put in like State Man, Deploy the Getaway, Micromanage, and other ones like that. So he's kind of, yeah, some of them obviously just won't be traveling to Cheltenham. In the pipe, same story. Manila Kakuna, Kilcrut, and Far Out are all not in there. Neither is Classic Getaway. And then Iron Maximus and Good Time Johnny are also not in the pipe. And they were most of the short ones, really. So yeah, that's a lot of ones you can cross off your lists. But I think Dan's got some other interesting points to make.
Yeah, it was a bit disappointing, really. I think last year we had a serious dip in the number of handicap entries, which, given the circumstances, obviously no crowds and COVID, etc., very understandable. I mean, 2020 at 856 was the total number of entries. Last year it was 676. So you thought it might rebound something to like the pre-COVID number, but this year it went down again to 654, which is a record low. And some of these races, like the Grand Annual being the main one, 38 entries is extremely low for a Cheltenham Festival handicap. I mean, that particular race, we'll just go from 2017. These are the number of entries it's had. Went 77, 65, 58, 53, 47, 38. I mean, surely if you're planning races and looking at the festival, that's a serious concern, not only for that race, but the whole festival handicap market as in general. Like, there's a lot of declining numbers in here. Some are maintaining their popularity, like the Pipe and the Coral Cup are still fairly well advertised, but I think you'd be slightly concerned, and whether that's a case of people still being cautious over COVID and not wanting to enter their horses just for social reasons, whether it's a case of, is the horse population there for these races? I wouldn't see why it necessarily isn't. It's a hard one to really pin your finger on as to the explanation, but I think the BHA would do well to have a bit of a look at this, because if that continues, it's looking a bit dicey. It'll look even dicier when there's another handicap entered in for the 5-day festival that seems to loom on us like a shadow at every turn. But yeah, it's a strange situation, and it makes our job slightly easier in going through them, but also ruins a bit of the fun.
I did see some people putting on Twitter that they thought maybe perhaps it's this Irish angle of people running scared of the Irish horses and thinking, what's the point in going and turning up and taking them on? But that doesn't seem like something that we should be even contemplating for a Cheltenham Festival, should it?
Well, also the prize money for some of these handicaps isn't exactly top notch. I mean, the Ultima, I think even that's had a boost, but there are plenty of other handicaps around the same trip, even in UK and in Ireland, that are more profitable in terms of winning. So maybe it's a combination of that. Then again, that's another debate entirely. Do you pile all the money into Cheltenham and let everywhere else suffer? That's probably not the way to do it, but it's something to bear in mind going forward, and especially as well if you're looking at horses down the lower end of the weights who may or may not have squeezed in a normal year. Well, they may have a better chance of doing so this time around, so something to keep in mind.
Was there any more on the handicaps that you guys wanted to talk about at all?
I've just got a couple of interesting entries that we probably weren't expecting that I'll just run through. So if we go to the Ultimate, this is probably the interesting one of it all. We've got Frodon off a mark of 164 who's been entered up here. I have no idea if he's an intended runner or anything, but very interesting if he does go. Lost in Translation managed to get an entry. He's currently off a mark of 155. That would be some turnout. And Fury Road did get an entry in there as well, but obviously we probably expect him to run the National Hunt Chase. Boodles, you got Fildor was entered. I probably wouldn't read too much into it. I think
Piper wasn't.
Yeah. That's the only interesting thing. Is obviously Piper wasn't. But do you think Fildor's really going to run off 145 plus? Probably not. But yeah,
he can't beat Vauban, my guy. No, he can't beat Vauban. It's fine. Just let it go. Just do it, Gordon. You know what to do. It's fine. Vauban's the best. It's fine. Just go the other way.
And then someone else who popped his head up was Andy Dufresne, is entered in the Plate and the Grand Annual. That was a bit of an interesting one that I hadn't seen coming. But yeah, so there's a couple of interesting ones in there, but there's not, other than the ones obviously I've read out, there's not too many more surprises.
I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more when the weights come out, so that won't be too long from now. All right, we'll move on to the selections. Becoming progressively harder. I don't know about you two, but I feel like I may be scraping the barrel this week, which should fill viewers with confidence.
I thought you've been doing that all season, to be honest, mate. So I don't think they're going to be too disappointed.
Monte Cristo for the Coral Cup, come on.
Did he get an entry, Jake? Do we know? Is he entered?
Yeah, he's entered.
Oh, come on. Yes.
Dream lives. Maybe that's why Phil Duderi wasn't entered.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, he's too scared.
Put your eggs in one basket. All right, I'll head over to you, Dan, for your selection this week.
Okay, yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, I'm definitely been finding it tougher in recent weeks. And what do you do when you find things slightly tougher? You revert to what you know. You revert to your home, the race that you've coveted for years. So finally, 8 weeks in, it's time for a Kim Muir selection, and not Irish, which may be a problem, but we'll get to that in a minute. I mean, look, part of this came from, it was a fairly late research one, but I've had my eye on him for a while, just wanted to see if he was entered, and he duly has been. You look at this market now, it's a bit of a mess as it stands. Front of the Salt is 5-1 favourite, good pick by Jake, but 5-1 really, it's not inspiring. I don't know why you'd be backing him at fives right now. It doesn't really make much sense. And then in behind him, you've got about 8 or 9 Irish horses from about 10 to 16 to 1, most of whom won't run out of their own volition. And the others probably won't make the cut for the mark. So it's a really strange old market at the minute. And for a lot of people want to find these Irish well-handicapped horses have been campaigned stealthily. This isn't a race that the Irish always dominate. It's 5 for 5 in the last 10 years. It does get evenly split up. And with that in mind, the horse I've come down on is Commodore, who we haven't seen for a while, but he bolted up over course and distance way back in December. It was a brilliant round of jumping from the front. I can't remember if you recall it or not, but it was really something to behold. It was a decent race. He won by 15 lengths at the end and did it a shade cosily, albeit he was able to fairly dominate from the front. But given how the race kind of unfolded, you'd think it would be kind of a questionable form line, but realistically, it's actually not too bad. Mr. Fogpatches was 15 lengths back in second. He then went to finish third in the Faestes. Courtmaster, who was miles back in third, he won next time out. And Santini, good old Santini, was back in fourth. He was the one who kept Commodore company out in front for a lot of the time. Those two kind of went hammer and tongs for a way out. Ultimately, Santini tied quite badly into fourth, but then he ran a stormer in the Cotswold Chase, showing that he is the force of old and that he is going to win the Grand National. Not my views, but according to some, he might well do that. So based on that, Commodore went up £10, effectively £9, because he was £1 out of the handicap this day, to a mark 142. Now that is a career high mark. It will demand a career best, but he's proven very effective over this course and distance. Venetia Williams is in absolutely flying form this season, and she's clearly kept him fresh for a shot at something big. He's always had his best form fresh, so I think that's a very big positive. Now he is entered in the Grand National. He's number 68 for that, which would probably seem unlikely that it's going to get in. Now, whether he risks it, whether they risk it and try and get him in there, I don't know. It might be touch and go, but if he does come here, he definitely has a clear chance based on course and distance form. And say that being kept fresh angle with him is absolutely massive. Like his record after a 2-month break over fences reads 1-1-5-2-1. Now that second came last season. He was beaten half a length by Snow Leopardess, who was running up 126 back then. She's obviously now had a terrific season and she's now £20 higher in the handicap. Those two pulled 18 lengths clear of a very decent field, which is what kind of leads me to think the Commodore is up to defying a mark in the low 140s when conditions are right and when he's fresh. He's a brilliant jumper. He's going to go from the front, which has been a way of giving a bold show in this kind of a race before. And although I don't know if he's going to run it, the ultimate he's also been entered in as well. If he does go here, I imagine that Lucy Turner will ride. Now, she's a very good amateur that Venetia Williams has a lot of trust in. She's ridden the likes of Fanny and Destraval, Green Book, to name a few this season. And I've always thought she's a very strong amateur jockey. And I'm due some redemption on front-running greys in this race. I had Kilfillan Cross finish second twice. The second time at very big odds when I put him up. Maybe some people might have watched this show way back when, like 2 years ago, when I put him up for the Kim Muir. Maybe they remember, and maybe they remember that heartbreak. So we are owed some compensation on these front-running greys. So I think he's the type who's going to give you a run for your money. If he turns up here, he isn't a 20-1 shot. He probably is about an 8 to 9 to 1 shot. He'll go from the front, jump like a buck. Is he well handicapped enough? We'll see, but should give you a run for your money.
I was here for the Kilfillan Cross days. I remember it very well. I felt that bloody heartbreak, that's for sure. I also love how you now preface everything by saying, well, I'm not really sure if it's going to turn up or not.
Well,
we
know my history. I'd be silly not to. That's why it's a good thing not running no bets available these days. Yes. God, I'd be penniless.
I'll quickly whiz through mine. it's only a small player from honest view, but it's Fury Road for the National Hunt Chase. He's a really good horse on his day. He was a Grade 1 winner this season over 3 miles, and he did that with without Jack Kennedy even trying, really, barely even breathed on him. 8 lengths back in second was Run Wild Fred. A further 10 lengths back was Vanilla. He's bigger than both of them in the market, willing to forgive his last run, given not only was that over a shorter trip, but he made a really bad blunder. I don't know who they're going to have jocked up on him, but this does look to be the plan. I think he'll stay, and he has lots of back class. You look back to that Albert Bartlett, that's worked out extremely well. I just think he could be one of the serious. I feel like he's going to be a serious contender for the race. Things obviously haven't gone 100% to plan for him. They always thought that maybe he could turn out to be a little bit better than this, but at 8 to 1, I think he represents a bit of value, and he could be pushing favoritism on the day. I remember him being very well supported before being pulled up in the stayers last year. And so, yeah.
That stayers run was so strange. Everything led up to that was so strange. It was never going a yard. Then he charged down about 2 out. He was making a move, and then he just disappeared again. It was 4 to 1. He went off in the end for that race. Just an enigmatic horse, to say the least.
My absolute favourite. And we'll head over to you, Jake, for your selection as well.
Yeah, so I can't wait for Commodore to make the running and set the race up for frontal assault, that's for sure. But
that's fine.
We'll move on to.
I'm used to seconds and thirds at big prices in handicaps. It's what I do, my guy. You can't hurt me anymore than I've already been hurt.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so my selection is, it kind of nearly got ruined by the BHA, actually, having to push back the deadline for the handicap entries by 24 hours because it ran today on Wednesday, and that's Queen's Brook and the Mares Hurdle. Now, thankfully, the price hasn't gone too much, so I'm willing to keep the selection as I was planning on doing anyway. But yeah, so I'll just quickly run through it. So obviously, she was a really smart bumper horse. She bolted up by 21 lengths on her debut, and then she finished third in the champion bumper behind two of the the best horses in training, really, and Fernie Hollow and Appreciate It. You couldn't ask for better Cheltenham form than that. But the problem with her is that she was a point-to-point graduate. So when she went into a Mares Novice campaign, where she was quite a short price favourite over the summer before it, she just wasn't a 2-miler, and she isn't a 2-miler. So those trips were always going to be too inadequate for her. So she made a debut at Ferry House, and she managed to get up like really late in the day at Ferry House, and she beat 2 nice types that day actually, but it was still showed that she wasn't really a 2-miler. And then she went to Down Royal for their Grade 3 like a couple of weeks later, and she finished second behind Sky Ace, just beating ahead. And no, she was just beating that day. Like, it was obviously a really nice performance, but you could just tell she's not a 2-mile horse. So Connection decided to step her up to 2.5 miles, and she ran up against Concertista and Manila Melody. And she put in a decent performance to finish third, but she was obviously, at that time, she'd only had 2 starts over hurdles, and they were vastly more experienced mares that went on, obviously, to the Mares Hurdle, with Concertista finishing second in that race. So that was obviously a decent novice campaign. Unfortunately, she got injured after that point, so we didn't get to see her again. We didn't get to see her tested in the spring. But she returned after 332 days at Wexford in October, and she desperately needed the run. It was just one of those performances, right? We need to get her out, get her to have a run. So she finished second behind Luna Display, who's a 132 horse in Ireland, been running in all the the Mares Novices this season as a second season novice, and she's an admirable type. You'd expect Queen's Brook to beat her, and she on that day she really did close all the way to the line, and was only narrowly beaten in the end. So she definitely came on for it, and she ran 9 days later. It's a bit strange that a horse so fragile would only run with 9 days between them. But she then went to Ferry House, ran in a 2-mile 4-furlong conditions hurdle, and beat Ciel de Neige by 4 lengths. Now, again, that's a really nice piece of form, because that horse is now rated 148 over fences, having won 3 times since. I know it's over fences, but it's still a piece of form that you can say it makes her out as a decent horse. And the best thing was, it was the first day that you could really see that she was trying. She really stuck her head down and went to go and win that race, and that was really nice to see. Now, again, she got injured. She's a very fragile horse. And she wasn't seen again for another 113 days until today in the Quevega. And the Quevega is actually an interesting little race for Gordon, because he's used it twice in the past. He's used it for Apple's Jade, who finished second before winning the Mares Hurdle. And then last season he used it for Black Tears, who then went and won the Mares Hurdle. So that's obviously a really good omen. And I was just hoping today that Queensbrook would run a really good race, because Gordon said that she'd need the run. But with Galois coming up this morning, it looked like a race that she could at least finish second in, that's for sure. And she duly did that. She jumped around really nicely under Dennis O'Regan, who was a late stand-in for David Russell. And yeah, she went around really nicely. And then it got to the end of the back straight on the sharp inside course at Punchestown. And she did look a bit outpaced at that point, but I think it really was just, she just needed that run so badly that you could see the fitness wasn't there. And then the whole way up the home straight, she just kept on closing and finding under pressure. And she ended up only being beaten a length and a half by Burning Victory. Now, Burning Victory was rated 143 going into that. So that's, again, a nice piece of form. And the best thing was Queensbrook had to give her £3 at the weights, which obviously she'll get back at Cheltenham. So she's going to be £3 better off with that rival. She's going to come on for fitness, dramatically, considering the way she came on for fitness between Wexford and Ferryhouse earlier in the season. We know that she can come on for these runs. And yeah, I think she's just got a really good chance in the Mares Hurdle. It's Gordon Elliott's only entry. He obviously won it last year with Black Tears. I think that she's going to go really well. You can still get a 9-1, which I think is fair. She was 12-1 this morning before the race. So I think, only a 3 points difference for showing that she's back and fit, I think is very fair. And yeah, I just think she's got a massive chance. It would be whether she's good enough, obviously, to beat the others, which I think is the problem. I think she'll definitely reverse that form with Burning Victory. I'll be very surprised if she didn't. It's just then, can she get to the likes of Tell Me Something Girl, Royal Kahala, Stormy Island if they all turn up? But I think she's a cracking each way shout.
Dan, we are running low on time, but you screwed your face at a few of those points.
Beating Sealed in Edge over hurdles being a good piece of form would make about 20 horses extremely well handicapped on their marks based on what he's done over the fences. And also, I think you'll find Sneezy Foster won the Mares Hurdle last year, didn't she? There you go. The history books are in my favour there. No, look, I agree with the point around Burning Victory. I mean, Burning Victory is going to have company on the lead. She's going to have Heaven Help Her, Stormy Island up there with her. She's not going to get an easy time like that again. And that's probably what helped her jumping on this occasion. Like you, I'd agree Queensbrook has every chance of reversing that form. Yeah, I think she's a fair each way shout. Like, I've got not too much to say. I say you and me, Willo, are both Tell Me Something Girl fans, I know. So we'll probably be on that train. But yeah, I can definitely see that as an each way angle in what is, let's be honest, a very open renewal.
Yeah, just noticed there's a lot of love for the mares races on this podcast. We've got two tips for the Mares Hurdle. We've got 2 tips for the Mares Novice, and we also got 1 tip for the Mares Chase as well. So yeah,
more Mares races is what we demand.
Oh, exactly that.
Mares bumper.
Grant, you would have both stepped in that last year. All right, that's going to just about round up this week's podcast. We'll take another step forward to the Cheltenham Festival next week. I think it's going to be 2 weeks out. Will we have handicap weights by next week?
Should do. Tuesday afternoon, it should be out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility we could be talking about that as well. Anyway.
Which is your favourite thing to do?
Oh, handicaps, love them. They're here, you two talking for half an hour. Cheers. All right. We'll catch you guys next week with another episode.